So I'll be mainly speaking about the early Wittgenstein, about his Tractatus and the influences of Frege and Russell on the Tractarian ontology. But I really hope that even to those of you who are not particularly interested in the history of philosophy or the history of early analytic philosophy, some of the metaphysical points which I'm going to discuss here will be of interest. And so yeah, let's begin.
Recording in progress.
So one of the striking things about the Tractatus is that the simplest sentences that Wittgenstein speaks about there, or the elementary sentences, or the Elementarsätze, consist only of names or of Namen. And I think that I should already here note something. I believe that the German word Satz, as used by Wittgenstein and by Frege before him, is probably best translated with the English word sentence, because what they had in mind were sentences, just plain sentences, linguistic entities. And when they want to speak about what a sentence expresses, then they speak about the Sinn, or the sense of a sentence. So it's probably best to translate Satz with a sentence. However, in the two most commonly used translations of the Tractatus into English, the first one by Ogden and Ramsey, and the second one by Peirce and McGuinness, Satz has been consistently translated with the proposition. The term proposition already brings in a certain Russellian flavor. But Russell introduced the notion of a proposition in contrast to the notion of a meaningful declarative sentence, because the proposition is, according to Russell, what a sentence expresses. It's a complex structured entity which several different sentences may express. For instance, synonymous sentences in different languages. And but when Wittgenstein and Frege are speaking about Sätze, what they have in mind, as I've already said, are just sentences which belong to a certain language. And so the term proposition will appear in these citations, because I took over the citations from the Tractatus from the Peirce-McGuinness translation. And this issue of how to translate Satz in Wittgenstein works is not new. It's quite old, and it's been much discussed recently among Wittgenstein scholars. It appears that already Anscombe encountered this issue when she was translating Wittgenstein's notebooks from the First World War. And her solution to this problem was really to forego any attempt at providing a uniform translation of the term Satz. And she decided to offer instead a translation which would be more context sensitive. And so approximately 50% of occurrences of the term Satz in Wittgenstein's notebooks, which Anscombe translated, have been translated as sentences, and the other half of them is translated as propositions. So that's one way to go, but I'll be just speaking about sentences and not about propositions. Of course, I'll be speaking about propositions when I'm discussing Russell's influence on Wittgenstein, because that's what Russell was mainly interested in. And so elementary sentences consist only of names. There are no predicates. And Wittgenstein really calls them concatenations of names. They are chains of names. And in 5.55, he says, we now have to answer a priori the question about all the possible forms of elementary propositions. Elementary propositions consist of names. Since, however, we are unable to give the number of names with different meanings, we are also unable to give the composition of elementary propositions. And just as elementary propositions consist of names only, so the Sachverhalte, the possible states of affairs which these propositions represent, consists only of objects. There are no properties, no relations, no universals, just objects. Wittgenstein calls elementary sentences concatenations of names, and what corresponds to them at at the worldly or ontological level are configurations of objects, and these are Sachverhalte. Sachverhalt is possibly best translated as possible state of affairs, because there is another expression which is in the vicinity, which Wittgenstein also uses in the Tractatus, which is Sachlage. And Sachlage corresponds to those states of affairs which are actual, which are out there in the world, which so Sachverhalte really are all possible states of affairs, and they can be represented by elementary propositions. In 2.0272, he says the configuration of objects produces states of affairs. Again, it is very strange that there's no mention of properties or of relations or anything similar, no universals, just objects. And in 2.03, he says, in a state of affairs, objects fit into one another like the links of a chain. This metaphor of a chain, really, just as the metaphor of concatenation, suggests that he considered these configurations of objects, which are Sachverhalte, as being such that the objects in them are ordered and ordered in a linear order. We know which object comes right after the other, and but that is only a metaphor. And of course, this puts Wittgenstein's views in stark contrast to those of Frege or Russell, even though he names the two in the preface to the Tractatus as the major influences on his work. In Frege, a meaningful sentence, regardless of how many saturated parts it contains, must also have at least one unsaturated part, which glues the other parts together and makes up the unity of the sentence. So a sentence cannot consist only of names, since names are saturated, and every sentence has to have at least one unsaturated part. These unsaturated expressions, Frege calls in general the functional expressions, because they have a void or an empty space for an argument. And these functional expressions, they refer to functions. Functions are references or Bedeutungen of functional expressions. Functional expressions are unsaturated, and so are the entities which are their references. Functions are unsaturated entities, while objects, on the other hand, which are the references of names, are saturated. And according to Frege, every sentence has to have at least one functional expression within it. Predicates, as we normally understand them, are just a special kind of these functional expressions. They are those functional expressions which really refer to functions which assign truth values to objects. And such functions are called concepts. So concepts are a special kind of functions, and the expressions for concepts, which are predicates, are a special kind of functional expressions. I assume that most of you are familiar with this already. And here is what Frege says in On Concept and Object. For not all the parts of a thought can be complete. At least one must be unsaturated or predicative. Otherwise, they would not hold together. For example, the sense of the phrase, the number 2, does not hold together with that of the expression, the concept prime number, without a link. It is contained in the words falls under, which need to be completed in two ways, by a subject and an accusative. And only because their sense is thus unsaturated are they capable of serving as a link. And something similar can be found in Russell. In Russell, sentences express propositions, and atomic sentences, they express atomic propositions. And atomic propositions, they do contain particulars, individuals or objects, but each of them must also have a universal as its constituent part, at least one universal. And that universal is a property or a relation. And here is what Russell says in the Philosophy of Logical Atomism. In every atomic fact, there is one component which is naturally expressed by a verb, or in the case of quality, it may be expressed by a predicate, by an adjective. This one component is a quality or dyadic or triadic or tetradic relation. And even in his earlier work, The Problems of Philosophy, he says, every complete sentence must contain at least one word which stands for a universal, since all verbs have a meaning which is universal. And this, of course, clearly shows that Wittgenstein's view are radically different than those of Frege and of Russell. And I was really trying to explain to myself, how did it come about that he was really espousing a radical form of nominalism with regards to properties and relations, while still claiming that in his views he was mainly influenced by Frege and Russell, who allowed for both properties and relations for universals or concepts. I mean, of course, one can make a very subtle distinction between concepts and properties in Frege's philosophy. I think that Marian David gave a talk on this topic. And I mean, one can claim that concepts are more wordy and properties are more worldly, and that concepts really corresponds to those properties which are somehow grasped by us. But anyway, I'm not going to appeal. I'm not going to use this distinction. I'm simply going to equate concepts with properties when I'm talking about Frege, as this distinction is really irrelevant to what I have to say about Wittgenstein. And what I want to claim is that Wittgenstein's idiosyncratic views of objects result from an attempt to marry Frege's insights about the concept horse paradox with Russell's understanding of what a proposition's being about a particular object amounts to. So Wittgenstein really took over some aspects of Frege's philosophy and then combined them with some aspects of Russell's philosophy. And even though none of these philosophers was a nominalist about properties or relations, Wittgenstein ended up being an extreme nominalist about them and claiming that they are just objects. So, what are these particular aspects? Well, when it comes to Frege, he was mainly inspired by Frege's concept horse paradox. And when it comes to Russell, he was mainly inspired by Russell's understanding of what it means to be about a certain object for a proposition. And going back to Frege, in On Concept and Object, Frege says that the distinction between an object and the concept is absolute, and that it cannot happen that something is both an object and a concept. If something is an object, it is saturated, and then it has to be, it doesn't contain any voids in itself. So it has to be saturated wherever it appears, in every context. It cannot be once an object and then another time a concept, once saturated and then another time unsaturated. And Frege was, by this claim, really answering to Ben O'Kerry's famous criticism in his article on Concept and Object. And Ben O'Kerry thought that the concept horse behaved like a concept in the sentence 1, Bucephalus is a horse, but like an object in the sentence 2, the concept horse is a concept. Of course, I've changed the examples a bit, but Kerry discusses the sentence, the concept horse is easily grasped, easily attained concept, but this formulation will do for me. I mean, the concept horse is a concept. So according to Kerry, when the term horse appears as a predicate in a sentence, then it really stands for a concept. And when it appears as in the subject place, then what it designates is an object. So the same thing is once an object and another time a concept. And that is not acceptable for Frege. Frege claims, namely, that the sentence, the concept horse is a concept, is meaningful but false. The term the concept horse is saturated and thus refers to an abstract object, which consequently cannot be also a concept. So it is false, because the sentence claims that that object is a concept, which is false. The paradoxical consequence of such a view is that of no concept it can be truthfully said that it is a concept. So when we take a look at the sentence 1, according to Frege, this sentence is analyzed into a name, Bucephalus, and the first level predicate, X is a horse. And this composition is meaningful, and since the object denoted by the name Bucephalus falls under the first level concept of being a horse, this is also a true sentence. But when we analyze the sentence 2, it has the name, the concept horse. And this being a name cannot refer but to an object. The object it refers to is an abstract object. And X is a concept is, according to Frege, again, a first level concept. So when we combine a name with a first level concept, we again get a meaningful sentence, only that this sentence is false because this concept, which is denoted by the predicate X is a concept, is such that it is really that it is defined for objects, and since it assigns to every object the truth value false, then an attempt to say of any concept that it is a concept directly in this way will end up in saying something which is meaningful but false. So we cannot truthfully say about any concept that it is a concept. And that is Frege's famous the concept horse paradox, because we can say, as Frege says somewhere, that the city Berlin is a city, and we can say that the planet Earth is a planet, but we cannot say that the concept horse is a concept. We cannot say it truthfully. And in 1986, Terence Parsons published his very influential article, which is entitled "Why Frege Shouldn't Have Said That the Concept Horse is Not a Concept." And there he is really criticizing Frege for his analysis of the sentence 2. And he says that the concept horse paradox could have been easily avoided, as Frege already had 2 exit strategies on his disposal and available to him, and he chose to forsake both of them. And according to Parsons, Frege was misled by the outward grammatical appearance of the term "the concept horse" into believing that it must be saturated. Frege really provides no argument to exclude another form of analysis according to which the concept horse would have this structure with an empty place after the word horse. So that would be an unsaturated expression. And as an unsaturated expression, it wouldn't denote an object, but some unsaturated entity, namely a first level concept. And according to Parsons, the sentence 2 could have easily been analyzed in the following fashion. Frege should have said that the concept horse line, which indicates an empty place, is a first level concept, and that line or X is a concept, is that this is a first level predicate which stands for a concept, the concept horse, and that X is a concept is a second level predicate. So here we would have a first level predicate combined with a second level predicate. None of these expressions is a name. And what would the sentence 2 would really truthfully claim that the concept denoted by the concept phrase, the concept horse, is falls under the second level concept, which is denoted by the predicate, second level predicate X is a concept. Of course, this second level predicate X is a concept would be defined for all first level concepts, and it will assign them truth value. Since all its admissible arguments are such that they are first level concept, it would assign to all of them the value truth. So that would be a constant function, an identity function of the truth. So to say that the concept horse is a concept is not just meaningful, but it's true, because this sentence has a different structure than Frege ascribes to it. Its structure is more similar to the sentence "there are horses" or "horses exist," where horses refer to the first level concept and exist or there are refers to the second level concept. So that is one exit strategy that was available to Frege, which he didn't appeal to. And the reason why Frege didn't use this strategy is, just a second, is why Frege didn't appeal to this exit strategy is because he ascribed to what Parsons calls Frege's dictum. And here is a citation from Frege. Frege says, "This is in full accord with the criterion I gave, that the singular definite article always indicates an object, whereas the indefinite article accompanies a concept word." So since in the sentence 2, we have a phrase "the concept horse," which begins with a definite article "the," this phrase has to be a name. It has to be a saturated expression. And a saturated expression, it has to refer to a saturated entity, to an object. So it cannot refer to a concept horse, but to some abstract object. And since what it refers to is an object, it cannot also be a concept. Nothing is both an object and a concept. So this is the false sentence. So it is by ascribing to Frege's dictum that Frege was led to a false conclusion by according to the Parsons interpretation. But what is more interesting is that Parsons really offers another interpretation, another exit strategy for Frege. And here is what Parsons said at some other places. Frege could have said that the concept horse refers to an object, so he could have stayed faithful to his own dictum, but that X is a concept refers to a first-level concept, which is true for some objects and false for some others, which is true for those objects which represent concepts, and false for all other objects. So Frege could have accepted his own dictum that when a noun phrase begins with a definite article, it is a name, and it refers to an object, if it refers at all. And he also could have said that the sentence, the concept horse is a concept, is true, because now when we take a look at this sentence from another perspective, the concept horse really refers to an object, to an abstract object. But that object is an object which falls under the first level concept of being a concept. So the predicate X is a concept, refers to a first level concept, which is such that some objects fall under it and some others do not. And those objects which fall under the concept of being a concept are proxy objects. They are objects which are used as proxies for concepts, which are used to represent concepts in the context of a sentence. And so it is true, after all, that of some objects that they are concepts, namely it is true of proxy objects, because they are mainly used to represent concepts. So this is the another interpretation which Parsons gives when he claims that Frege could have avoided the paradox. And so now we may ask ourselves, so what are these objects which are such that it is true of them that they are concepts, that they fall under the first level concept of being a concept, which are proxy objects and which go proxy for concepts? Well, the roots of this idea can be found in Frege. And the concept denoted by the predicate X is a horse, and the object denoted by the name, the concept horse, even though one of them is a concept and the other is an object, they are not completely unrelated. Why? Because the sentence is Bucephalus is a horse, and the concept horse is instantiated on Bucephalus. They have the same zin. They express the same thought. They have the same truth conditions, according to Frege. So here in sentence 1, we have a predicate X is a horse, which is combined with the name Bucephalus. And here in the sentence 2, we have a name, the concept horse, which stands for an abstract object, and which is combined with the predicate being instantiated on Bucephalus. So somehow we can use this abstract object to speak about it instead of speaking about the concept of being a horse, and to convey the same thought that we would convey about the concept with the sentence 1. So all the thoughts about concepts really can be conveyed without referring to concepts, but instead by referring to their proxy objects. And this is the way in which the object, which is the reference of this phrase, the concept horse, can be said to go proxy for the concept which is the reference of the predicate X is a horse, can be said to represent that concept. The object referred to by the noun phrase, the concept horse, goes proxy for the concept referred to by the predicate X is a horse. And Frege's original German word, I mean, this going proxy is a way of speaking which originated in English translations of Frege's writings. And Frege's original word is vertreten, which really means to represent, or it has almost a more literal connotations. Vertreten means to be a substitute for something, or to be a stand-in for something. So an object which is denoted by the phrase "the concept horse" is really a stand-in for the concept which is denoted by the predicate "X is a horse." It can be used as its substitute. We can use it to convey the same thought about the concept without mentioning the concept itself. And here is what Frege says on comments on sense and meaning. There is now a great obstacle in the way of expressing ourselves correctly and making ourselves understood. If we want to speak of a concept, language with an almost irresistible force compels me to use an inappropriate expression, which obscures, I might almost say, falsifies the thought. And so we cannot really speak about concepts directly, because when we try to do so, we are speaking about their proxy objects instead. We can speak about concepts only by using predicates which refer to them, only by saying about certain objects that they fall under them, only by using the expressions which refer to them predicatively, says Frege, only in an indirect way. And Peter Geach's influential article, Saying and Showing in Frege and Wittgenstein, after it was published, it has become clear that it is the concept horse paradox to be found in Frege's writings, which was that it was the main philosophical source of Wittgenstein's famous distinction between what can be meaningfully said in a language and what can only be shown, and which is really one of the characteristic features of the Tractatus. But what has been not sufficiently recognized is that the concept horse paradox did not influence Wittgenstein just in that matter, and did not motivate him just to introduce the distinction between saying and showing, but that it also was the main philosophical source for his ontology in the Tractatus, for his denial that there are any properties or relations. And so we may ask ourselves, really, what are these proxy objects? And the proxy object for a certain concept is an abstract object. That much we are told in Frege, by Frege himself. And we already know that for every concept, there is an abstract object which is associated with it. And that's that concept's extension. So Parsons really points out that Frege speaks about proxy objects for concepts in a quite similar way to how he speaks about extensions of concepts. Of course, Parsons doesn't go all the way, and he doesn't equate a concept's proxy object with its extension. But it was done later by Ian Proops in 2013, and he says that if a phi is a concept, then phi's proxy objects can be expressed in a Begriffsschrift in a similar fashion. This really stands for the extension of the concept phi, the set of objects that fall under the concept phi, and the second conjunct really is there to ensure that phi is a concept. Phi is a concept if and only if fx equals this is the horizontal or content stroke fx. And Proops really believed that by a proxy object for a concept, Frege had in mind just that concept's extension, nothing else. And the main textual evidence which he was able to offer for this claim is Frege's letter to Russell from June the 29th, 1902, in which Frege says, accordingly, this expression stands for the extension of the function x times 3 plus 4, would express precisely what is expressed imprecisely in the proposition, this is the zeta times 3 plus 4 is a function. But this does not seem convincing to me, because if proxy objects were extensions, then the sentence, the concept chordate is identical to the concept renate, would be true, because the concept chordate, this is the expression which starts with a definite article. It's a name according to Frege. It refers to an object, to the proxy object for the concept being a creature with a heart. If that proxy object is the extension of the concept being a creature with a heart, that extension is the same as the extension of the concept being a creature with a kidney. And that is the reference of the name, the concept renate. So this would be a true identity claim then. But Frege would not accept these sentences as true because that would go against his intentional understanding of functions, because Frege, at different places, says that there could be functions which assign the same values to the same arguments, but which are nevertheless not identical as functions. These functions, according to Frege, have the same Wertverlauf. They have the same stream of values. The ordered pairs, the set of ordered pairs which correspond to these functions are the same. But that doesn't mean that the functions themselves are identical according to Frege. So Frege would treat the function x times x minus 4 and the function the square of x minus 4 times x as different functions. So he wouldn't treat them as identical, which he would have to if the proxy objects for them would simply designate their stream of values or their extensions. And we can use proxy objects to speak about concepts of any level. So let us consider the sentence, there is at least one square root of 4. This sentence really consists of two predicates. One is the second level predicate, there is at least one. And another is the first level predicate, x is square root of 4. And so we have two predicates. There is at least one. This predicate refers to the second level concept of existence. And the predicate x is square root of 4, it refers to the concept, the first level concept of being a square root of 4. But then we have the second level predicate of existence here. There is at least one. And we can paraphrase the sentence 3 by saying the concept square root of 4 is realized. Now, x is a square root of 4, which is a predicate, has been substituted for this noun phrase, the concept square root of 4, which is the name of a proxy object for the concept of being the square root of 4. And the second level predicate of existence, there is at least one, has been substituted by its proxy first level predicate, x is realized, which refers to its proxy first level concept. And we can go, and of course, being a first level concept, it itself has its own proxy object. So we can replace it and put instead of it its proxy object. Then we get at the second step, the concept being realized is instantiated on the concept square root of 4. So here we have the concept being realized, which refers to an object, and we have the concept square root of 4, which also refers to an object. This is the proxy objects for the first level concept of being the square root of 4, which appears in the original sentence. And this is the proxy object for the second level concept of existence. This is the object which is named by the phrase, the concept being realized. So now we've eliminated all the talk about the concepts with which we began. One was the first level concept and the other was the second level concept. And it seems that we can convey the thought expressed by the sentence 3 simply by using their proxy objects and by not mentioning these concepts. And this seems to be the main lesson that Wittgenstein learned from Frege's concept horse paradox. We can really eliminate all the references to concepts of any level and replace them by references to their appropriate proxy objects. So the whole rich hierarchy of concepts which Frege describes in his writings can really collapse, and anything that Frege has to say can be captured simply by speaking about the appropriate concept, the appropriate proxy objects. And another lesson came from Russell. And Russell, in his logical atomist phase and earlier, had a more fine-grained analysis of sentence meaning than Frege did. And according to Russell, if a sentence is used to make a claim about a certain object, then the proposition it expresses has to contain that very object as its part. Here is what Russell says in the Philosophy of Logical Atomism. it is clear that all the propositions in which the word Socrates occurs have something in common. And again, all the propositions in which the word mortal occurs have something in common, something which they do not have in common with all propositions, but only with those which are about Socrates or mortality. Namely, all the propositions in which the word Socrates occurs, they have something in common, and that which they have in common is Socrates himself. It's the very man. He is a constituent part of every proposition which is expressed by a sentence which contains the name Socrates. I mean, Russell is here for the sake of example, treating the word Socrates as a logically proper name and not as an abbreviation for some definite description. And there is also his famous example from the Problems of Philosophy with Bismarck, where he says, that is to say, when we say anything about Bismarck, we should like, if we could, to make the judgment which Bismarck alone can make, namely the judgment of which he himself is a constituent. In this we are necessarily defeated, since the actual Bismarck is unknown to us. No, this goes after the following citation. I'm sorry. The sentence Bismarck is an astute diplomatist, said by Bismarck, expresses a proposition which contains Bismarck as its constituent part, while in mouths of others it expresses a different proposition which does not contain Bismarck. So when Bismarck says Bismarck is an astute diplomatist, he is expressing a proposition which is such that it contains Bismarck as its part. But when someone other than Bismarck says the same sentence, by that he fails to express the same proposition, because he cannot use the word Bismarck as a logically proper name, because he doesn't have knowledge by acquaintance with Bismarck, and which Bismarck has with himself. And so he cannot use this word Bismarck as a name to refer directly to Bismarck, but he can use it only as an abbreviation for a definite description. So he fails to express a proposition which would contain among its constituent parts Bismarck the man. So even though the proposition which Bismarck expresses with the sentence Bismarck is an astute diplomatist may be equivalent in truth value to the proposition which would be expressed by the very same sentence uttered by someone else, these are still different propositions, since one of them contains Bismarck as its part, while the other does not. So it seems here that Russell is really assuming something like some form of mereological essentialism for propositions. If a proposition contains Bismarck as its part, it cannot not contain it, so to say. It cannot really lose its part and still remain the same proposition, or gain some new parts, or change parts and still saying the same. It still stay the same proposition. So when anyone else utters this sentence and expresses by it a proposition which does not contain Bismarck as its constituent part, it cannot be the proposition which is expressed by Bismarck himself with this sentence. And so when we apply Russell's considerations to the sentences that we have been considering when discussing Frege, so then we get that these sentences cannot really express the same proposition. Let us consider the sentence 1, Bucephalus is a horse, and the sentence 2, the concept horse is instantiated on Bucephalus. The sentence 2 expresses a proposition which contains as its constituent part the proxy object for horseness, so to say, the proxy object which is the reference of this name, the concept horse. And this object is not a constituent part of the proposition expressed by the sentence 1. So it cannot be the case, pays Frege, that these two sentences express the same proposition. It seems here that Russell really ascribes to something which may be labeled as Russell's principle, and that he wants to claim that an object cannot appear in the content or a proposition expressed by a sentence in a merely accidental way. If it characterizes an analysis of the sentence's meaning, then it must feature in each and every admissible analysis of that sentence. It cannot be the case that we have two different analyses of some proposition, and that one of them is of some sentences which we claim to be synonymous in meaning. And it cannot be that that one of these analyses really recognizes an object as a constituent part of an express composition that is not recognized in another analysis. Because in that case, that would not be that wouldn't be the same proposition which is being analyzed. It would be two different propositions. And Wittgenstein really took over this principle from Russell, but in a somewhat modified form. He did not apply this Russell's principle to what the sentence expresses, because according to Wittgenstein, that would be the sentence's Sinn or its sense. But he applied it to a would-be truth maker of a sentence, to a Sachverhalt, to a state of affairs which is represented by an elementary sentence. So according to Wittgenstein, if a Sachverhalt, if a state of affairs which is represented by an elementary sentence contains an object, then it cannot not contain that object. It cannot be the case that a state of affairs can lose one object or gain some new objects or change some objects for other objects and still remain the same represented Sachverhalt. It would be another Sachverhalt and not the one that we were discussing earlier. So it seems that Wittgenstein accepts some form of mereological essentialism, but not with regard to propositions, but with regard to the truth makers of sentences, to would-be truth makers of sentences, or to possible states of affairs which are expressed, which are depicted or represented by those sentences. And the influence of Russell really in the Tractatus should not be underestimated, because it seems that this principle really underwrites what Wittgenstein calls his Grundgedanke, or his main thought in the whole of Tractatus, which is formulated in 4.0312. He says there, my fundamental idea is that the logical constants are not representatives. Logical constants are logical connectives, the signs for negation, conjunction, disjunction. And what he says here is that they are not names. They do not refer to objects. And he discusses it in an example. And in 5.44, he says the proposition not P is not about negation, as if negation were an object. And if there were an object called not, it would follow that not P said something different from what P said, just because the one proposition would then be about not and the other would not. So if this logical connective, if it were a name, then it would refer to an object. But then if we take that P is an elementary proposition which contains no connectives, then the proposition not P wouldn't represent the same state of affairs as P, because the state of affairs which is represented by P does not contain among its constituent parts that abstract object which is denoted by the sign not. While the proposition, while the sentence not P would really depict another Sachverhalt, that which contains among its constituent parts the object which is named by this sign, by the sign not. And of course, this is Wittgenstein is here applying Russell's principle to criticize Russell himself, because when Wittgenstein came to Cambridge, Russell in 1911, Russell was working on a book called Theory of Knowledge, where he claimed exactly that logical connectives are names of some abstract objects. And later he really abandoned this project, mainly due to Wittgenstein's criticism. So here we have the Russell's principle applied for criticizing Russell, but applied to the represented Sachverhalte, not to propositions. Of course, it should be said that the reason why two sentences which represent two states of affairs, such that one of them contains a certain object, A, and the other does not, could not express the same thought, that the reason for that is not because the latter sentence can be true in worlds without A, while the former cannot, since there are no such worlds. According to Wittgenstein, possible worlds do not differ among themselves with regard to which objects they contain. They only differ with regard to how these objects are combined together into Sachverhalte. So that's the only difference between possible worlds. So Wittgenstein was an early adherent of the view called necessitism, that if an object exists in one possible world, then it exists in all possible worlds. The domains of all the possible worlds are the same. So the real reason why Wittgenstein claims that two sentences which represent two states of affairs such that one of them contains a certain object and the other does not, cannot express the same thought is really because he adopted the Russell's principle that we discussed earlier. And if the concept horse is a name, just as Bucephalus, as Frege claimed, then the thought expressed by the sentence, the concept horse is instantiated on Bucephalus, involves the reference to the object named by the phrase, the concept horse. And this subject thus has to feature in every sufficiently carried out analysis of that thought. The idea is the following. If you analyze a certain sentence in order to discover its logical form, and if at some point you reach a name, since a name is semantically simple, you cannot analyze the name any further. You can only analyze the rest of the sentence. And the object, which is the reference of that name, it has to feature in the represented Sachverhalt, or the represented state of affairs. And by continuing the analysis, you can only discover what other objects are also there in that Sachverhalt as its constituent parts. But you cannot, by further analysis, remove the reference to the already discovered object. So if the sentence, Bucephalus is a horse, can be analyzed, as Frege suggests, as saying that the concept horse is instantiated on Bucephalus, and if the concept horse is a name, then it refers to an object, to an abstract object, which is a constituent part of the represented Sachverhalt. And if we analyze the rest of the sentence further, we will discover new objects, some other parts of that represented Sachverhalt. But we cannot really, we cannot take away that reference to the origin, to the proxy object for hoarseness. The proxy object for hoarseness has to be there in the represented Sachverhalt as its constituent part. This is the result of the application of Russell's principle. And since the thought cannot contain both the object named by the concept horse and the property, or as Frege would say, concept denoted by the predicate X is a horse, i.e. both the concept and its proxy object, the analysis of the thought into Bucephalus and horse cannot be its complete analysis. So if we take a look at a simple atomic sentence, say Fa, where F is a predicate constant and A is an individual constant. So according to Frege, this sentence can be analyzed in two ways. It can be analyzed as into A is an F. Here we have a name A, and we have a predicate F. But it can be also analyzed as the concept F is instantiated on A. Here we have the name, the concept F, and we have another name A. And the predicate F is nowhere to be seen in the second analysis. But according to Wittgenstein, if this second analysis is an admissible analysis of this sentence, Fa, then the Sachverhalt, which is represented by this sentence, has to contain as its constituent part the proxy object for Fness. So it is only the second analysis which is acceptable for Wittgenstein, and not the first. Because if A is a name, it cannot be analyzed any further. But since the Sachverhalt contains also not just an object A, but also the object which is the proxy object for the concept Fness, then the predicate F cannot be primitive. It contains a hidden reference to the proxy object for Fness. It's not fully analyzed. This cannot be the complete analysis of a sentence. So any analysis of an atomic sentence which really distinguishes between a name and the predicate cannot be the complete analysis of that sentence, because the predicate really contains a hidden reference to the proxy object, to the appropriate proxy object, which is not acknowledged. So the predicate has to be analyzed further until that reference is visible. So here's what Frege says. This might be surprising only to somebody who fails to see that the thought can be split up in many ways. But we must never forget that different sentences may express the same thought. This is not something Wittgenstein would accept. In the Tractatus in 3.25, he says, a proposition has one and only one complete analysis. There are no two acceptable complete analyses of a sentence. And the same goes for sentences, for, say, atomic sentences with a term for relation. If we have R, A, B, according to Frege, that could be analyzed into A stands in R to B. A and B are names, and R is a functional expression that is an expression for relation. But the same thought can be analyzed in another way. It can be analyzed into the relation R is instantiated on A and B. A and B are again names and stand for object, but the relation R is also a name, and it stands for a proxy object for the relation R. So here in the second analysis, what is being acknowledged is the reference to the proxy object for the relation R, which is hidden in the first analysis. So according to Wittgenstein, only the second analysis can be the complete analysis. Therefore, every elementary sentence can be understood as claiming that the relation of instantiation holds between some objects. Whenever we speak about properties or relations, when we analyze what we are saying, we will see that we do not speak about them, but about their proxy objects and about the instantiation holding between some objects. But it may be objected, this still leaves something besides object at the end of the analysis, namely the relation of instantiation. But that is not really the problem for Wittgenstein, because the relation of instantiation is not a proper concept. It is what he would call a formal concept. It is not, the relation of instantiation is not another constituent part of the represented Sachverhalt, but merely the way objects fit into one another like the links of a chain. It is shown in the linear order of names within the sentence. When we say the relation, when we analyze RAB into the relation R is instantiated on A and B, here this being instantiated does not stand for some relation, but really reflects the order in which objects, the object which is the reference of the phrase the relation R, the object which is the reference of the name A, and the object which is the reference of the name B, this is instantiated really reflects the order in which they are linked to one another as if in a chain. So the instantiation is not a real relation. So the philosophical motivation for Wittgenstein's controversial claims that an elementary sentence consists only of names and that the state of affairs it represents contains objects only is to be found, if I'm not mistaken, in Frege's concept horse paradox and Russell's understanding of aboutness. So what he learned from Frege is that he could express any thought which is apparently about properties or relations, which is about some concepts or universals or whatever, that he could express it by really not mentioning those properties and relations and merely by speaking about their appropriate proxy objects. So everything that can be said meaningfully can be said about objects. And what he learned from Russell, that if an object appears in what is represented by a sentence, it cannot not appear. It has to characterize the content which is expressed in an essential way. So combining these elements, one from Frege and one from Russell, he really arrived at a radically nominalist position with regard to properties and relations, even though Frege himself wasn't a nominalist about properties or relations, and Russell wasn't a nominalist either. And here, I mean, there are many interpretations of the Tractatus, and I feel obliged to at least say something about. Yes, I'm finishing.
Can you put back the previous
slide? So, shall I read it? The philosophical motivation for Wittgenstein's controversial claims that an elementary sentence consists only of names and that the state of affairs it represents contains objects only is to be found, if I'm right, in Frege's concept horse paradox and Russell's understanding of aboutness.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, I mean, as you all know, there are so many different interpretations of Wittgenstein's Tractatus. So I feel obliged at least to say something about some of them and to say how is my interpretation positioned with regard to them. And of course, it cannot be in accordance with all of them because there is no consensus among Wittgenstein scholars. But of course, the interpretation that I'm offering here is the old school traditional metaphysical interpretation of the Tractatus. It is not a resolute interpretation or a therapeutic interpretation, etc. But among the traditional metaphysical interpretations of Wittgenstein's work, there are also many different interpretations. And what I have to say is that my interpretation is really unreconcilable with that which Max Black offered in his companion to Wittgenstein's Tractatus, because there Max Black claims that Wittgenstein really uses words, name, and objects in a very idiosyncratic way, and that by a name he understands any semantically simple expression. So by names, Wittgenstein really understands both names and primitive predicates as well. And by objects, Wittgenstein accordingly understands not just objects, but also primitive properties and primitive relations. So Max Black really gave a quite deflationary account of this issue, of his position. And according to Black, his position isn't even a nominalist position with regard to properties and relations. And so, but interpretation that I'm offering here is really goes a long way together with that offered by Anscombe in her An Introduction to Wittgenstein's Tractatus, because Anscombe was probably the first to take this objects-only ontology quite seriously, and she claimed that there are only objects. And when we say that an object instantiates some material property, say that of being red, well, that fact that a certain object is red is really, I mean, to use a more contemporary terminology, is grounded in some other more basic and more fundamental fact, namely that object is really a part of a configuration of objects which ground the fact that object is red. Whenever we say that an object instantiates certain property, that is ultimately made true by there being a certain configuration of objects, and not of objects and properties, but only of objects. And however, Anscombe also points out that when we speak of different objects instantiating the same material property, that can be because these objects take part in radically different configurations of objects. Say, let us suppose that both objects A and B are red. So it is a fact that A is red and that B is red. But what really makes true the sentence A is red is the fact that A, at the fundamental level of reality, takes part in a configuration of objects with some other object. Say that A is a link in a chain with C and D. That there is such a link, A, C, D, such a chain of objects, such a Sachverhalt. And this Sachverhalt is really what makes true the sentence A is red. Again, when we consider a sentence which claims that another object instantiates the same material property of that of redness, when we say that B is red, it can be so because among the Sachverhalte in the world, there is a configuration of objects which contains the object B, but with some completely other objects than those that appear in the configuration which makes true the sentence A is red. I mean, B can be a part of a chain of objects, say B, E, F, and that chain B, E, F makes true the sentence B is red, while the chain A, C, D makes true the sentence A is red. So the configurations of objects which really make true different sentences ascribing the same material property to different objects can be completely different. And Anscombe introduces no restriction on that. And this is where my interpretation really parts ways with Anscombe, because if I'm right, these configurations of objects could not be completely different, because both of them, if we look at the configurations of objects which make true the sentences A is red and B is red, then both of them would have to overlap in at least one of their constituent parts. Both of them would have to contain the proxy object of redness, because the proxy object of redness would have to be in both chains of objects, so to say. So this is where what I'm saying differs from what Anscombe claims, but her interpretation is closest to what I've been describing here, outlining here. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Maybe we should continue in English because the lecture is recorded. So maybe somebody in China, somewhere will find the counterexample.
So
okay, let's go for.
So I'll stop sharing.
Or
no, maybe I should leave the slides if anyone
yeah,
has anything to ask about them. Okay, I'll share again.
Maybe we'll go back and forth through slides. So let me ask you here at the end, last couple of slides. So your question is how Wittgenstein in his Tractatus, this I have old Sarajevo edition, how can he talk about properties and relations? Is that your main question, or?
Well, my main question is really, how did it come about that Wittgenstein espoused and endorsed some radical form of nominalism in the Tractatus, about nominalism about properties and relations, because he claims that there are only objects in the state in the states of affairs, and these states of affairs together make up the world. And so there are only objects, there are no properties and no relations. And this is really so different from what Frege and Russell claimed at the same time. And he also claims that he was for the most part influenced by what Frege said and by what Russell claimed. And so how is that compatible with each other? Because Russell made space for universals and Frege also made space for concepts, but it seems that there's no space for concepts or universals in the Tractarian ontology. They're just objects which are linked in some chains of objects, and there are no properties, no relations. And yet he himself acknowledges Frege and Russell as main influences on his work. So I was trying really to reconcile these claims. So to offer an interpretation of the Tractatus that would really stay true to his own pronouncements of acknowledgement, and it seems to me really that he really took over some aspects of Frege's philosophy and then combined them with some aspects of Russell's philosophy, and then he was thinking through until he reached the last radical consequences of such a combination, and this is how we get this very strange ontology as the one we find in the Tractatus.
Hey, for me, well, sorry for taking time others, but this Max Black's interpretation, actually when you are going through first couple of pages of Tractatus, I had that impression that he's using word name just for objects, properties, relations, whatever, classes, groups, kinds, in the widest possible sense. However, later as you go through the book, it seems that it's not so. So the first thing that crossed my mind was this Max Black's interpretation, but it seems that it's not tenable. He's really talking about objects. And the second option, Anscombe's reading, would that be kind of class nominalism or something that we can talk about redness if we talk about class of all red objects, or this Verlauf, the current of some objects, something like that?
So that would be certainly a nominalist position with regard to properties and with regard to relations, but it wouldn't be a nominalism with regard to abstract objects, because if I'm right, some of the objects which occur in these configurations of objects, in these chains of objects, have to be proxy objects for concepts, because this is how he manages to replace speaking about concepts with speaking about objects. And if these proxy objects appear as constituents of Sachverhalte, then at least some of the Tractarian objects are abstract objects. So it seems that he would acknowledge abstract objects, but would not acknowledge properties and relations. So this is not a nominalism. I mean, I don't know what he would say about classes, but classes are just a special kind of abstract objects. But he wouldn't really deny the existence of all abstract objects, if I'm right. Because at least some of the Tractarian objects are abstract, if not all of them. It cannot be the case that all the objects which he speaks about in the Tractatus are material objects. At least some have to be abstract objects.
Thanks. Yeah, questions, comments. Sure.
So, well, if I'm right, I mean, you don't need any concepts of any level to really to convey all the truths there are. Because if what Frege has shown in his concept horse paradox is that instead of speaking about concepts, or I mean properties, you can really convey the same thoughts, you can convey the same contents by speaking about their proxy objects instead. So objects are enough. I mean, he's really applying Occam's razor. You don't need any properties or relations. And you don't need them. I mean, everything which is true would stay true even if there are no properties and relations, because it would stay true because of there being some configurations of objects. And among those objects, there will have to be these Fregean proxy objects for concepts.
So this Anscombe's comment reminds me on, so somewhere the following, say, interpretation that for Wittgenstein, what has the ontological priority, facts or objects? And then the interpretation was facts have priority. First we have facts, and then we have facts about, I don't know, Joe. And then we are abstracting Joe from the series of facts about him, or wall, roof, or house, whatever. So this reminds me that. So what do you say about that?
Yeah. Well, yes, it's obvious that he was ascribing to some form of holism in the Tractatus already, because in 3.33 he really rephrases Frege's context principle. And I mean, in the Tractatus there are only two types of expression: names and sentences, Namen and Sätze. And names, their only meaning is their Bedeutung. They only refer to objects, but they don't have any Sinn. That's different from Frege. And sentences, on the other hand, they don't refer to anything. They don't have a reference or a Bedeutung. They only have a Sinn. But now in this Tractarian framework, names can refer to objects only within a context of a sentence which has a Sinn, only within a context of a sinnvoll Satz. And so yes, sentences are so to say, prior in determining meaning to names which are their parts, and correspondingly, states of affairs which are represented by those sentences are prior to objects which are their constituent parts. And sentences describe states of affairs while names, they name objects and they refer to objects. And there is also, yes, I mean, it is also the case. I mean, he says somewhere that objects can be found only within states of affairs. They cannot be found in isolation. So there is no state of affairs which has only one element to it, which is a kind of a single object state of affairs. So objects have to appear within some chains of objects. So they already have to appear within some states of affairs.
They have to appear in some chains. So objects
Yes.
appear in some chains.
Chains.
Of objects. Yeah, talking about 3.333, is this maybe the main motive for this talk about objects and pseudo-objects, and that we are solving Russell's paradox? The last sentence of 3.333.
Well, I don't have the Tractatus with me right now, so I cannot check what he says there. What does he say there?
It becomes immediately clear if instead of Fu, we put there exists such phi, such that F of phi, U and phi is Fu. So something about, the point is about notation. So that if we use the right notation, it becomes obviously clear that Russell's paradox is solved. The first sentence of 3.333, function cannot be its own argument. That's he believed that with the proper notation, Russell's paradox cannot even arise. And that's what he's saying, that really the theory of types is kind of superfluous, because it would be immediately obvious if we use the proper notation. Yes, I mean, I don't know to which extent this is related to what I'm saying. I was mainly interested in why there are only objects in the Tractarian ontology, and whatever happened to properties and relations. That was my main concern. But in a way, yes, I mean, what I was saying is really he reduces every sentence to a sentence which claims that there is a relation of instantiation between certain object. And when I said that this relation of instantiation is not a proper relation, because there is no constituent part in a represented Sachverhalt which would correspond to it, but it is merely an order of objects within the chain of objects, which is a Sachverhalt. So yes, what is instantiated and what is being shown by the order. So yes, something remains there which is merely shown, but again, according to Geach, this is also the consequence of Wittgenstein's reading Frege's article on concept and object, because he believes that this idea of showing what cannot be meaningfully said is derived from Frege's considerations of the concept horse paradox also. So yes, the concept horse paradox has influenced many aspects of the Tractatus. Comments, questions? So I have a clarification question. Can you sum up about these pseudo objects? What are they? Why are they introduced?
Well, not pseudo, but proxy objects.
No, proxy.
Well, they are introduced. I'll just go back to the slides about Frege. Just a second. Because Frege says that when we say the concept horse is a concept, we are claiming something false. And we are claiming something false because the phrase, the concept horse, begins with a definite article. And when the noun phrase begins with a definite, when a noun phrase begins with a definite article, it has to be a name. and if it refers at all, it refers to an object, because saturated expressions or names refer to saturated entities, i.e. objects. And so the concept horse is a concept. This is a name for Frege. And the rest of the sentence is a predicate. The predicate line is a concept, or X is a concept. And according to Frege, this name stands for a certain abstract object, the proxy object for hoarseness. And this sentence claims that this object falls under the concept which is denoted by the predicate, that of being a concept. So the sentence basically says of some abstract object that it is a concept. And since nothing can be both an object and the concept at the same time, so it's false. So it's false. So this is an unpleasant conclusion that you have to say that the claim the concept horse is a concept which really looks like a true claim is false. You cannot say truthfully of any concept that it is a concept. That's the paradox. But so what is that object which is the reference of this phrase, the concept horse? Well, that is the proxy object for hoarseness. And why is it the proxy object for hoarseness, or for the concept being a horse? Because when we take a look, for example, at these two sentences, they manage to express the same thought. In the first sentence, you are apparently saying about Bucephalus that it has a certain property, a property of being a horse. So you are directly, by using this X is a horse predicatively, as it should be used, you are mentioning its reference. You are speaking about its reference, which is the concept of being a horse, the true concept. And you're saying that the object denoted by the name Bucephalus falls under that concept. But you can really avoid any reference to the concept, which is the reference of a predicate X is a horse, by paraphrasing this sentence into this form, and by saying that the concept horse is instantiated on Bucephalus. Here you have the name, the concept horse. It does not refer to any concept. It refers to an abstract object, to a proxy object. And you have another name, Bucephalus. And you have, of course, this is instantiated. But let us disregard this instantiated thing. This part of the sentence. What became apparent is that you have really managed to paraphrase away the reference to a concept, which is the reference of a predicate in the sentence 1 of the predicate X is a horse, and at the same time to express the same thought, because according to Frege, these sentences have the same truth conditions. They have the same Sinn. They express the same thought. The Gedanke, which is expressed by 1, is also the same Gedanke as expressed by 2. But the Gedanke expressed by 1 seems to be about a certain concept, which is the reference of predicate X is a horse. But the Gedanke expressed by the sentence 2 seems to be not about any concept, but about the abstract object, the concept horse, and about Bucephalus. So where has the concept, which is the reference of a predicate in sentence 1, where has it vanished? Well, it got substituted. The concept got substituted by the object. So this object has this peculiar property to be able to be a substitute for a concept when we want to say when we want to express some true thoughts about that concept. So this object can be a stand-in for a concept. That is why it is called the proxy object for the concept of hoarseness, or for the concept axis, or the concept of being a horse. So yeah, I mean, was that an explanation?
Yeah, good. Thank you. Can you go one slide back?
Back to Parsons? No.
Where it said that the concept of horse is not a concept.
Oh.
Which one is this? Yeah.
Several slides back. Yeah, that's here. Yes.
To me, sentence number 2 looks true.
Well, that's what Parsons said. That's what Parsons said. Parsons said there is no paradox really here. Frege, there were at least 2 ways to analyze this sentence in order to turn it true, and the sentence is true just as it looks to us. Yeah. The problem is that Frege decided to analyze it in a especially wrong way, so to say, according to Parsons. So according to Frege, this sentence is really a combination of a name, the concept horse, and this is the name because it begins with a definite article. All the expressions which begin with a definite article, that's his dictum or his criterion. That's how he himself calls it. All the expressions, all the noun expressions which begin with a definite article are names. So the concept horse is a name, and since it is a name, it stands for an object, and the rest of the sentence, X is a concept, or line is a concept. It is a predicate in sense for a concept, and so the sentence, according to Frege, says of a certain object that it is a concept, which it is not and cannot be, and therefore it is false. But what Parsons said is, you can analyze this sentence differently. You can say that the concept horse is not a saturated expression. Where the concept horse really has a structure, the concept horse line. It has an empty space for an argument and is an unsaturated expression. And it stands for the first level concept. And the concept X is a second level concept, just as the concept of existence is a second level concept. And so you have the combination of a first level concept and a second level concept, not a combination of a name with a first level concept, as Frege claimed. And in that case, this would be true. But you can also stick to Frege's dictum and say that all the noun phrases which begin with a definite article have to be names. And you can say that the concept horse is really a name and it stands for an object, and that X is a concept. The rest of the sentence is a predicate, which stands for a first level concept. But then you would need to say that this concept, which is referred to by this predicate, is true of some objects. Which objects there are? These are some strange objects of which it is true to say that they are concepts. But these are these objects which are proxy objects. So because they can be used to represent concepts, it is true of them to say that they are concepts. Okay. That's Parsons' second strategy.
Very sophisticated, complicated readings say that I'm explaining to you that the concept horse is a concept. It's not a horse, and you cannot ride a concept horse. You cannot ride it because it's a concept, it's not a horse. So in that context, the concept horse is a concept, looks as some kind of tautology or something like that, some platitude.
Well, you cannot ride number 7, but number 7 is object, not a concept. I mean, you cannot use that kind of arguments.
You cannot ride concept horse. You can ride a horse, but you cannot.
Well, because you cannot ride the concept horse, it doesn't mean that the concept horse is not an object. Because there are also other objects which you cannot ride. You cannot ride number 2. I think you
say the concept dog doesn't bark because it's a concept. It's not a dog.
No, from the fact that it doesn't bark, it does not follow that it is a concept, because I don't know, numbers are objects for Frege, but abstract objects. So number 2 is an object, but it doesn't bark. So if from the fact that the concept dog does not bark, you conclude that it's not an object but a concept, then you should also conclude from the fact that the number 2 does not bark that it's a concept but not an object. That would be false.
What I'm trying to say, I'm trying to give some primitive, simple-minded Balkan flat reading.
Yes, I understand. Yeah.
It's just tautology. Yes, the concept horse is a concept. Yes, it's a concept. That's why.
But it's not according to Frege. It's not according to Frege because
it's not according to Frege. It's not according to Terence Parsons.
No, according to Parsons, you should say that the concept horse is a concept. That according to Parsons, that is true. But that is true because the sentence really should receive one of the 2 analyses that he suggests, and it really shouldn't receive the analysis which Frege gave. And so Frege shouldn't have said that the sentence 2 is false, but he analyzed that the sentence 2, so to say, wrongfully, and so he arrived at wrong conclusion that this sentence is false. No, it's true. And it can be true even if you stick to Frege's dictum that that every phrase which begins with a definite article is a name and thus refers to an object.
How is that in German? This the concept, concept.
I think it should be in German, der Begriff Pferd.
Der Begriff und
Pferd.
Be?
Horse, Pferd.
Pferd. How is the difference between the and definite and indefinite article?
Well, in the indefinite article, when you have a noun phrase which begins with an indefinite article, it suggests that that phrase is used as a concept expression. It is used as a predicate. So there is a very famous example in Frege with regard to Vienna, to the city of Vienna. So if you say, I'm not now citing Frege, but if you say, for example, Vienna is the capital of Austria, then you're using the word Vienna as a name, and it is a name, and it refers to an object, and that object which it refers to is a city, particular city. But when you say Triest ist kein Wien, this is the original Frege's example.
What is
so
the
you
example?
Triest, like Trieste, like the city of Triest.
Yes.
If you say Triest ist kein Wien, you have kein, and kein is the negation of ein, and so you have the negation of ein Wien. So there appears to be an indefinite article in front of the word Wien or Vienna. So what you're saying is Trieste is no Vienna. You're not saying Trieste is not identical to Vienna, because then you would be using Vienna as a name. But you're saying something like Trieste is nowhere near Vienna, or or as Frege himself says, you are claiming that Trieste is not a metropolis. You're using ein Wien, so you have added the indefinite description in front of a name Wien, originally a name for a city. When you put an indefinite description in front of it, indefinite article in front of it, what you have is a phrase which begins with an indefinite article, and since the article is indefinite, it is now being used as a predicate, as a concept. And this concept, which is the reference of ein Wien, is, as Frege says, the concept of metropolis. So when you say Trieste is no Vienna, or when you say Trieste is kein Wien, what you're claiming is Trieste is not a big city. It's not a metropolis like Vienna.
Okay.
So yes, that's the idea. It is very strange, because Frege himself was very suspectful about the outward grammatical features of certain expressions, and of course he believed that the outward grammatical structure of a sentence is not really revealing of its hidden deep logical structure. And the ordinary language is more misleading than anything else. And but when it comes to the articles, he was really so much relying on the fact that some phrases contain definite and some contain indefinite articles. And the distinction cannot be more significant, because the phrases which begin with a definite article, they are names, they are saturated phrases. And the phrases which begin with an indefinite article, they are predicates. They are unsaturated. The references of the former expressions are objects, and the references of the latter expressions are concepts. So the differences cannot be any bigger than that.
Okay, but in your explanation, what seems too much for me is that kein is not ein, and ein is indefinite article.
Yes. If you say that, for instance, when you say
kein in German just means not.
Yes, but that's not. But it doesn't mean a not as nicht. That's the issue. But kein just means something like not one, not a. I mean, it's just like you say. For instance, Vienna is not a chair. You are and this a chair, this phrase a chair, is a predicate. And if you say Triest ist kein Wien, what you're basically doing in German is you are putting a negation in front of a predicate which is ein Wien, according to Frege.
Kein. Are you with?
And if you say Triest ist nicht Wien, what you would be getting is the negation of an identity statement. You would then say that Triest is not identical to Vienna. That what you would be expressing by the German sentence Triest ist nicht Wien. You are denying the identity, and the identity is really Triest ist nicht Wien. Triest and Wien are used as names. They stand for objects. You're saying that these are different objects. You are denying the identity of these objects. But when you're saying Triest ist kein Wien, you're not doing that. You're not negating an identity statement. You are saying really that Triest, that the city of Trieste, does not fall under the concept which is the reference of ein Wien, of a Vienna, it's like you're saying Trieste is not a metropolis. It does not fall under the concept of which is the reference of a metropolis. That's how he proceeds with this.
Yeah, I mean the meaning is understandable and clear, though I think that this analysis of kind
Are sophisticated. Yes, you have to be to some extent attuned to all of this in order to be able to follow it.
And I can tell you, well, this is not Vienna. You are looking for something for some special shop or restaurant.
Yeah, but what you're meaning, but you don't want to say this is another city different to Vienna, different from Vienna. No, what you want to say is this is not a sufficiently big city. This is not a metropolis. Yes, that's exactly.
Vienna, you are spoiled and you believe that your favorite shop is everywhere in the world.
Yes, and you cannot find it in Trieste.
Say this is not Vienna.
Yeah.
So it is the same meaning without this kind.
Yeah, this is kind. This is the meaning which would be conveyed by the use of German kind. So yes, you have to be careful. Triest ist nicht Wien expresses a completely different statement. It's a negation of an identity statement where Triest and Wien appear as names. Whereas the sentence Triest ist kein Wien expresses the claim that the city of Trieste does not fall under the concept of being a metropolis.
Well, that's perfectly understandable, but I think that in his analysis he's going too far. I can tell you, this is nicht Wien. Das ist nicht Wien. And given the conversational circumstances,
I mean, you want to say that it can be heard as Triest ist kein Wien. Yeah, but I mean, Frege would say that this is simply the result of the imprecision of the ordinary language. I mean, yes, and
I don't know whether kind always comes with something indefinite.
Well, yes, kind is the Triest ist kein Wien is Triest ist nicht ein Wien. That's the sense. Whereas Triest ist nicht Wien is not the same as Triest ist nicht ein Wien. That would be the idea.
Usual expression, kein Geld. I don't have money, no money.
Yeah.
So indefinite. It is indefinite.
Okay, yes, it's a negation of kein is negation of ein. Yes, it's a negation of an indefinite article, and that's different from just using nicht without an article. I mean, but now we're going into subtleties of German language and Frege. Yeah, into so to say, yes, we are into Frege exegesis.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Are there any more questions, comments? Matija, Alexander, Danica. Well, we should conclude. So it's already 42. So Andrej, what's your thought about this Tractarian nominalism? Is it right, wrong?
Well, I don't know what to say.
Motivated.
I was really interested in I don't know how to say, to make myself understandable what Wittgenstein is claiming there. So and why is he doing that? And so I don't know if I'm right, but it seems to me that he's really developing some ideas Frege and some ideas from Russell together, and this is what you get as a result. If you take that much from Frege so as to acknowledge the existence of proxy objects, and if you take that much from Russell so as to claim that when a proposition is about certain object, that object essentially characterizes that proposition, it has to appear as its constituent part, and it cannot not appear. And if you buy these two claims, so then you're already then you've already embarked the nominalist train, so to say.
Well,
and this is what he managed to show. I mean, that is not an obvious thing. I mean, so if you take that much from Frege and that much from Russell, you will end up being a hardcore nominalist with regard to properties and relations.
Can Wittgenstein in Tractatus say this pen is red?
Yeah, you can say this pen is red. So what is really so? Yes, this brings us back to Anscombe and her analysis. I mean, yeah, it may be true that this pen is red. So you have a true sentence, this pen is red. So what is complicated is to produce an analysis of this sentence. And even if, I mean, it's obvious that things like chairs, pens, and people, etc., these are not Tractarian objects. Because of object, he says that they are indestructible, that they exist necessarily, etc., and no pen exists necessarily. So it's obviously that this pen is not a semantically simple expression, so it has to be analyzed in a certain way. And being red is also, according to Wittgenstein, not a semantically simple expression. So the predicates have to vanish when you carry out analysis sufficiently far. So being red, when you say the pen is red, this predicate is red. It has a hidden reference to the proxy object for redness. So you have to analyze it further until the name of the concept red appears, which stands for an object, which stands for the proxy object for redness. So you have to, so there are some unrecognized names there packed in the predicate expression. So the predicate expression isn't the final word, so to say. It does not belong to the final analysis of the sentence. So that is really what is radical. I mean, because of Frege and because of Russell, we are used to the idea that when we have a sentence, a very simple sentence which consists of a name and the predicate, say A is red or this pen is red. So we are used to the idea that the name stands for an object, the predicate stands for a concept, and that's it. That's the final analysis. It cannot be analyzed any further. According to Wittgenstein, whenever you break sentence into a name and the predicate, that could not be the final analysis of the sentence, because there are some names which are not acknowledged and which are hidden in the meaning of the predicate. So you have to analyze predicate further until all the predicates vanish and only the names remain.
So how to analyze pencil is red?
I don't know, but there has to be some. And he himself is unable to provide the examples of elementary sentences. I mean, had he provided an example, we would know what this chain of names looks like, which forms a sentence according to him. So, when you fully analyze this sentence, what you would get would be simply a chain of names, but names which stand for Tractarian objects. And so this pen also should be analyzed because it cannot stand for the material object pen, because that object is not indestructible, necessary, etc. So it cannot be a Tractarian object. So you need to analyze that further. But what is interesting is really that the predicates should all vanish. That is so strange. That you don't find that in Frege or in Russell.
Oh, roughly. Sorry, the pencil is red.
Russell would say that this pencil
red
stands for the universal of redness.
We have a proxy object redness, and then we say that pencil instantiates the proxy object redness or something like that. I
mean, the talk of proxy objects really stems from the interpretations of Frege and the concept horse paradox. I mean, Russell is not saying anything about proxy objects. But what you can say is when you have this pen is red, but you can say that what this sentence claims is that the concept red, the object which is the reference of the name, the concept red, is instantiated on this pen, and you can treat this pen as a Fregean name. So you have two names, the concept thread, and you have this pen, and between them you claim that that the first of them is instantiated on the second, that the object which is the reference of the first is instantiated on the object which is the reference of the second. But this instantiation is nothing substantial. It's not a relation. It simply says that the first object comes before the second in the chain of objects.
Oof.
That's yeah. If I'm not wrong, that would be the idea. You don't need to speak about concepts, since whatever you can meaningfully say by speaking about concepts of different levels, as Frege acknowledges a very rich hierarchy of concepts. So you can all say that simply by speaking about objects only. That's what Wittgenstein learned from Frege, and what he learned from Russell, that if an object appears in what is represented by a sentence, then it has to appear. It cannot go away, so to say.
Okay.
If an object, if a certain content expressed by a sentence is about a certain object, then that object is strictly speaking part of the content of what the sentence represents, and that's a Sachverhalt.
Ooh. Okay, thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrej, for this talk and this squeeze.
I hope this was interesting, at least. I don't know.
Recording stopped.
Aha. Evo, nema više.
Nadam se da je